The Financial Planner, presented by BSC, Investors Protection Fund.
Hello and welcome to Financial Planner. It's the second chapter as far as mutual funds investments are concerned, and the step that we are going to tell about is the various kinds of mutual funds that are there. How do you choose which is the best suited plan for you, or what should you do about going about your first mutual fund investment? And we have Hemant once again joining us. Hemant, thank you once again for joining us. And of course, as always, we'll be taking up your queries on the show. Well, Hemant, we discussed about the benefits, the pros and cons as far as mutual fund investments are concerned. Now, very important and critical part that I want to begin the show is that when we talk about investing in a mutual fund, one is that there are so many schemes. How do you choose?
Well, yes. I mean, it's always said about a mutual fund that's a very simple way of investing in different markets. But investing in them may not be always easy. That's because there are so many options that are available today. There are broadly three markets that one looks at. You have equity market, you have debt, and you have, in commodity side, you have gold, for example. In equity, there are so many schemes, a variety of schemes. You have diversified fund, you have sector fund, thematic fund, right? There are different kinds of varieties.
And then you have your large cap and a small and mid cap and so on and so forth.
Absolutely. On the debt side, starting from, you have liquid fund, you have short-term fund, you have ultra short-term fund, you have debt fund, fixed maturity plan, asset allocation fund. There are different varieties of fund. What we need to understand, or investors need to understand, is that what the mutual funds are trying to do is to, offer you different kind of products which may suit the requirement of some investor or the other. What is important for investor to understand is assess your own requirement as to what you should be looking at. The mistake that investors make is they straight away jump into a particular product without deciding what should be their asset allocation. For example,
what is best suited for them?
Oh, absolutely. The asset allocation is important. Why it is important? Because that defines the kind of risk you want to take or you're comfortable with. That also decides, depending on your time horizon, as to where your money should go. Rather than investing straight away into a product, and then suddenly you will realize that your investment in equity takes you much beyond your risk-taking capacity, which is not the right way. So while there are options available, okay, you can utilize them properly, provided you assess your own needs and then go for funds. So important step, the first step what investors need to take is decide what should be their asset allocation. In fact, I would say that one more step they need to take is first define their own objectives or goals. Give them a time horizon. The moment you give them a time horizon,
which asset class.
Oh, absolutely. You have
for achieving those goals.
Oh yes, absolutely. You want to achieve something after 1 year, 5 years, and 15 years. The moment you know your time horizon, as you rightly said, you can decide which asset allocation to go for. In the short term, your focus has to be on capital protection because you need that money for a specific purpose. You can't be taking risk on that. On the long term, when you're investing for 15 years, your biggest threat is inflation, not so much the capital loss. So the focus has to be on equity. So if you go step by step, follow these processes, and then when you come to schemes, there are so many schemes in equity, for example. Equity as an asset class is risky. You don't have to make your portfolio very risky unnecessarily. Okay? What we need to understand is someone who's beginning to invest in mutual fund should focus on diversified fund. Gradually, or a pure large cap fund or index fund. Then gradually you move on to other risky funds, which could be mid cap fund, could be small cap, could be sector, could be thematic. Go step by step. First, understand what this asset class is all about. Understand what are the risks associated with this, what are the potential, what are the pitfalls. Once you've understood all that, you become comfortable with the asset class, then go and include all these, but in fairly restricted manner. Don't go overboard, because it doesn't, if you're investing in an aggressive fund, doesn't mean that aggressive fund will always give you better return. It can actually expose you to much more risk than what you're capable of taking.
Okay, when we talk about, say, investing in a particular stock market or in a stock market, when you look at the price of your stock, which plays an important role, and you talk about whether the valuation is right or not. But when it comes to mutual fund, you have your NAV.
Yes.
What really is an NAV, and how you as an investor need to view an NAV?
Well, that's a very interesting question. I think there are a lot of myths, especially about how one should view NAV. NAV is what? It is net asset value. It reflects the true value of a unit on any business day. Now what happens when you invest in a scheme? Every scheme has a portfolio, which means it will have a basket of stocks. At the end of the business day, every business day, these securities are valued at the closing price. Okay? And then when you value all the securities in the portfolio, you arrive at a number which is the market value of the total portfolio. To this amount, what you add is the current assets of the mutual fund. There could be that you have sold securities and you still have to get the money, so that is added here. What you reduce from that is the current liabilities and the provision for expenses. You have management fees and the other expenses also. The amount which is derived out of after that is divided by the number of units outstanding. For example, this amount is, let's say, 10 crore and the number of units outstanding are 1 crore. Okay, the NAV per unit is going to be 10 rupees. And the important thing for investors to know here is that SEBI has laid a formula as to how this NAV has to be calculated, as well as how the securities have to be valued. So there is a complete transparency. Every mutual fund has to follow this process, which means that the NAV reflects the true value. So if you decide to exit on a particular day, the whole idea is that you get NAV based price, which means that you should get the true value of your money when you exit from a fund.
All right. Well, now let's go about, we discussed very briefly in my first question about there are so many kinds of different funds, mutual funds that are there. Let's start with equity. So in equity funds, you have, as you mentioned, the diversified is the first way to go about it. But let's very briefly touch upon what are diversified funds essentially, what are index funds, and then there is also, you have your tax saving funds, which are also equity based, perhaps one of the best route to, save tax and having an exposure to equity through that, and of course the sectoral funds. Take us through that briefly.
Well, let's begin with the diversified fund. What are these diversified equity funds? These are funds which will have an array of stocks in their portfolio. What a fund manager does is he diversifies the portfolio across sectors, across industries, across segments. There are 3 segments in the market. You have large cap, mid cap and small cap. So what a fund manager does in a diversified fund is he will give you a wide diversification so that your risk which are associated with investing in equity market gets restricted. The more diversified your portfolio, the lesser the risk, because all the segments will not perform in the same manner, all the sectors will not perform in the same manner. So by having a basket of diversified portfolio, you can minimize your risk. And the best thing here is the fund manager has the freedom to move across sectors, industries and stocks. Now,
which would be of interest or would bring in better returns,
absolutely.
perhaps.
If he feels that a particular sector is not going to do well and there's some other sector which has a higher potential, he can freely move money from one sector to another sector. And from the investor's point of view, it is also important for them to know most fund houses, in fact I would say every fund house, have internal limits as to how much exposure can you have in a segment or a sector. So it is not that you are completely at the mercy of the fund manager, that he decides as per his whims and fancy as to where he wants to go. While he has the freedom, he is also driven by the internal rules which prohibit him from taking exposure beyond a certain level in either a sector or a stock.
Okay, so the word of caution also is there that the diversification which the fund manager enjoys doesn't mean that investors should diversify in having that many number of diversified funds. That would mean, that would be quite, bad for their portfolio.
Oh, you're absolutely right, Priyal. What investors do is they like having 15, 20, 25 funds in the portfolio. As you rightly said, with one investment in a mutual fund, you are actually going to own a basket of 50, 60, 70 stocks. So you don't have to actually have so many funds. It will actually defeat the purpose because most of them will end up having the same stock. The only difference could be in terms of level of exposure. So diversified fund, I think, should be looked at by someone who is beginning to invest in mutual funds, and also the existing investor, the most experienced investor also should be looking at diversification, because I feel that your portfolio should be fairly diversified. Yes, if you're an experienced investor, you can invest some money in sector, thematic and other funds, but the bread and butter, so to say, has to be a diversified fund. If you look at a sector fund, they're very focused in the sense that invest in a particular sector.
Be it power, infrastructure, FMCG,
absolutely,
and so on and so
absolutely.
forth. That should be a part of an investor's portfolio only if you're otherwise diversified and want to look at a particular sector.
And not for someone who is beginning to invest in the initial stages. Like I said, equity as an asset class is risky. first you need to understand as an investor what are these risks all about. Be comfortable with that, and then move into these kind of fund. And also, before you decide on a sector, these are basically funds which try to take advantage of industry cycles. So the timing has to be perfect. The selection of sector has to be perfect. So it is not something which a new investor or retail investor should be doing. Sector funds have the potential to give you more return than diversified fund.
But are more riskier, so
absolutely.
You take the bet
They can
on
expose
that.
you to much higher risk compared to them. Yeah, if you look at index fund, for example, index fund are passively managed fund which track a particular index. So a fund may track, let's say, BSE Sensex. What it will do is that it will invest in all the stock that are a part of BSE Sensex.
And
in the same proportion. So basically what it does is, as an investor, you don't have to worry about which stocks are going to be in my portfolio, in what proportion. It's a very transparent investment vehicle. But the downside is that you forfeit the chances of getting better returns in the market. Because what you're saying is that I'm happy with the kind of return index is
giving. Well, on that note, we'll slip into a short break. We'll come back and take up your queries when we return.
The Financial Planner, presented by BSC, Investors Protection Fund. The Financial Planner, presented by BSC, Investors Protection Fund.
Welcome back to Financial Planner, that time that we take up your queries.
Investment Ladder, presented by BSC, Investors Protection Fund.
Well, the query that we have, is from Manoj Mohan. He's a 23 years old working professional and is currently has combined income of rental as well as salary of about 40,000 rupees per month. He is invested in about an SIP, 6,000 rupees he invests every month. His funds include HDFC Top 200, HDFC Equity, HDFC Mid Cap Opportunity, ICICI Prudential Focus Blue Chip, Reliance Gold Saving Funds. He has got a term plan for himself which is for 50 lakh rupees. He's also got a Mediclaim for 3 lakh rupees. His goal is to buy a house in next 10 years down the line and also buy a car. He's also holding portfolio in terms of some certain stocks which we will not go deep into. But he says he has a long-term horizon and investments could be held for 1 year and above. So while it's a great thing to see a 23-year-old having such a planned investments and also setting up a goal, a 1 year horizon is limited. He can really leverage if he, extends it for furthermore period of time.
He should be, especially if he's investing in, asset class like equity. 1 year time horizon is obviously not good enough at all. In fact, when you're investing through SIP, don't forget that, if you invest for 5 years, the average holding period is just 2.5 years. So if you're talking about 1 year, obviously this is not the right time horizon. It would be better that if he can extend his time horizon. But if you look at his existing portfolio, I would say that his fund selection has been quite good. Okay, he can continue investing in that. Maybe for the kind of money that he's investing, he can reduce a fund or two. But since these are all good quality funds, he can continue with them. But my recommendation would be that in future, whenever he is adding more funds, more money basically, then he can invest in the same fund rather than, including more funds in the portfolio. As far as the insurance, the risk cover is concerned, he has a term policy of 50 lakh. Considering his, income of 40,000 per month, I think it's perfect. He has done the right thing by going for a term plan, which is what, an investor should be doing. Because what you need to do is, like we said earlier, you need to have an adequate risk cover. And this is what a term plan will give you. And it also allows you to separate your insurance and investment needs. And I think he's followed the right strategy there. He's also done the right thing by going for a Mediclaim policy. Like I said earlier, for anyone who's looking to do a financial planning, the first step should be to cover the risk, which obviously include the life as well as health insurance. For his two goals, he wants to buy a house after 10 years and then he wants to buy a car. The thing is that whenever you are trying to achieve objectives, you need to first define those objectives, which he has done, buying a house and buying a car. You need to then quantify them. It's very, very important. While he has given the time horizon, which is also a very important step. So what you need is goals, quantify them, decide the time horizon, then only you can decide how you can achieve this. And depending on if it is 10 years or more, you can look at equity or equity-related instruments. If it is a short-term goal, then obviously the priority has to be given to the safety of capital, which means the debt or debt-oriented fund will come into the play. So I think what he needs to really do is to quantify these goals and define the time horizon even for the second goal of buying a car, and then work it out. And I think it'll be much more easier for him to achieve his goals.
Okay, now about his mutual fund portfolio, how does that look like?
Well, it looks good. It looks good. The fund selection has been pretty good, like I said earlier. He can continue with this. What he needs to do is, whenever he's going to invest more money, he should be adding in the same fund rather than including more funds in the portfolio.
Okay, now let me go across with regard to the second mail that we have received, which is from Rinesh, and he's essentially 24 years of age and he's working in an MNC. He gets about 35,000 rupees per month. He has not done any financial planning and he's a beginner, and therefore he wants us as to step by step tell him how to look at investing his money.
Very interesting. I would say, Rinesh, what he needs to do, we just touch upon certain aspects in the previous question. What needs to be done here is that whenever you start the process of investing, it's important that you define your investment goals. Very important, which means that you may have a short-term goal, you may have medium-term goal or a long-term goal. Define those, quantify them, which means that when you quantify those goals, which means that how much money you will require to fulfill that goal. And while doing that, don't forget to consider inflation, because inflation can really eat into the value of your money. And if you don't consider inflation, what will happen is you may be planning for a certain amount. When you reach there, you'll find there's a huge shortfall. So consider inflation, quantify your goals, and also give a time horizon. The time horizon will help you in terms of deciding which asset class you should have or which should be dominating your portfolio. For example, when you talk about, let's say, retirement plan or children education, the time horizon could be 15 years to 25 to 30, 35 years. So when you invest for that kind of time period, the focus has to be on the asset class where you can beat inflation. It's very, very important. And second thing is, look at an asset class which has the potential to give you better return. Yes, equity can be risky, but the fact that if you maintain the discipline of investing on a regular basis, you can minimize the risk of fluctuations. In fact, you can turn it to your advantage by investing at different levels and taking advantage of averaging. So take these steps and then decide what are the investment options you should be looking at. Another thing which you must remember before you even start your investment process is look at the risk cover. Ensure that you are adequately covered by insurance, both in terms of life as well as health, and then focus on your investment goals. And once you start the process, make sure that you increase the amount of investment as you go forward, and don't allow this process to be discontinued because of the market conditions. So if you follow this process, there is no reason why you cannot achieve the success that you want to achieve with your investment portfolio.
Well, on that note, we'll slip into another short break, but we'll come back and address more of your queries when we return.
The Financial Planner, presented by BSC, Investors Protection. The Financial Planner, presented by BSC, Investors Protection Fund.
Welcome back to Financial Planner. Let's take the next query, which has come from Jasmeet Singh Arora of Kolkata. He's 39 years of age and is working in an IT sector. His present take-home salary after deducting TDS is about 35,000 rupees per month, and he wishes to save about 5,000 rupees per month. He needs guidance as to what should his investment route be. He's paying advance tax on his salary, and that's what is the information that he's given us. What's the advice that you'd like to give?
Well, my advice to Jasmeet would be that, before you make any investment, try and see how much tax you can save. As we know, under Section 80C, you can save as much as rupees 1 lakh. So depending on how much tax you have to pay, how much you can invest, the first priority has to be given to that. And the reason for that is, when you save tax, you actually improve your return. So focus on that. Since he's already paying tax, he needs to really work it out, how much he needs to invest to save taxes. And once he does that, there will be a provident fund which will be deducted from his salary. Then there are other options like you have PPF. PPF is a very good option. He can look at that. And then if he can take some risk, and if he wants to improve or understand what equity investment is all about, I think ELSS schemes would be suitable for him, because what ELSS does is allows you to understand equity as an asset class. At the same time, you save your taxes. So I think it can be a mix of these instruments. But like I said, important thing is first give priority to saving taxes and then look at investment, because once you do that, you improve your return much more than what you get from investments.
So for those who are wanting to invest in an ELSS, which perhaps is the best route to have an equity exposure and save tax, there is an overhang as far as the DTC is concerned. What should the investors be doing? There is no guarantee whether DTC will come by April 2012, but what should the investors be doing at this point in time until such time that they're looking at because you're looking at a long-term investment when we are talking about equity?
Well, I think, yes, DTC is an issue. We are not very sure as to whether DTC will be applicable from 1st April 2012 or not. But currently, for the current year, it is very much there. So I would say that they rather focus on the current year than looking at what will happen beyond April 2012. This is an efficient way of saving tax. Okay, if they want to invest in ELSS, they should go ahead, because it's not going to affect their investment what they have already made before DTC comes into being. So in that case, they should go ahead. There are only 4 months left, so obviously they can't invest through SIP. Someone who wants to invest, start investing now. The markets are down. Okay, this gives them a good opportunity, but I would still recommend don't invest and lump sum as one go. You still have 4 months to go. You can invest in 3 or 4 installments and wait for the DTC to happen and see whether this scheme still exists or not. If it does, I sincerely hope that the government reconsider this decision, because this is a very efficient way for investors to actually understand equity investment. Okay, so if that stays, then you can carry on the process. Otherwise, for this current year, definitely you can go ahead and invest in ELSS.
Investment Ladder, presented by BSE, Investors Protection Fund.
While the DTC overhang is there, as Hemant is saying, it's one of the best routes as far as having an exposure to equity and also saving your tax, and therefore investors need not worry as to whether or not it comes in April or not, but perhaps look at investing in ELSS if you want to do it currently as well. Well, on that note, we've completely run out of time on this episode. Well, the mutual fund lessons will continue in the next episodes, in next coming few episodes as well. But on our part, this is what is going to continue, and we hope you will send us your feedback and your queries, as we'll be more than happy to address them on the show here. Thank you so much for watching.
The Financial Planner, presented by BSE, Investors Protection.